Well, hello again. Time for the instructor's presentation, week 6. And we're going to pick up by looking back at week 5 here for a minute. The case study assignment was due, and most of you probably received your comments back from me by now. This week in Pritchard, we have 3 chapters, 13 through 15. We're going to look at SWOT analysis, and that's what you did last week, SWOT analysis checklists, and the risk breakdown structure. 3 more techniques for working with risk. For this week, we have the midterm case study that'll be issued, and that's due August the 3rd. I may extend that 2 days. I will put out an announcement if I do. But however, that gives you at least 4 days to work on that. And then in the Pritchard, we're going to hit 3 more techniques looking at root cause identification and analysis. That's a very interesting approach to risk. And then risk register tables, we use those all the time in our risk management and risk analysis. And then looking at some project templates. And then, of course, the PMI practice standard. What I want to talk about this week is continuing on at looking at some of these questions, some of these things we can ask or that can get our brain moving to get us thinking about items that pose risk or have a risk impact to the project. The title of this slide says looking at cost. Recall how we were doing that last week. We said if we look at cost, at a cost risk, we have also got to consider not only the impact to cost of the cost risk, but we also got to look at the impact to performance and also the impact to schedule. When we're looking at cost, we can look at vendor quotes, and I gave you an example last week. When do they expire? If we're getting quotes as a part of our project planning and we're getting quotes from vendors, we should make darn sure that those quotes are valid long enough for when we intend to place the purchase order, so we can hold those quotes and not have to pay some other fee. If we're talking about office leases, for instance, maybe we are going to have a small project team work at the customer's location or at some remote location, and we've got to take a look at a small lease, or maybe the company or the customer already has a lease there. Does it expire during the project period? That could impose a great cost on us if we had to move our project team in the middle of a project. Contract renewals, I talked about organized labor. What about services, facilities? What about the type of internet connections our organization has with the ISPs and with the internet? Do we have any issues there? If we're going to do any hiring, any recruiting, or what about the lead time on finding somebody? What about the lead time on recruiting them, bringing them in, interviewing them? A number of people will apply for one position, and we'll look at a lot of resumes, and then we'll look at a lot of people, and then we'll only be hiring one. And if we're going to get people transferring into the project, either later on to do tasks or to become part of the permanent project team for the duration of the project, what is the assimilation, or I call that spooling up time? In other words, if a person is going to report Monday morning at 8 o'clock to the project team to go to work there, our schedules and the way we look at it, well, we expect them to be doing productive work at 8 o'clock in the morning when they sit there. Well, that's not true. When a new person comes on board, whether they're from inside the company or somebody else, it takes time. They got to find out what is the job they're supposed to do, who are they supposed to work with, who is going to lead them or work with them or support them. What about taking a look at the project plan? How about giving them some kind of briefing on and introducing them to the team members and to the project and all that? That takes time. You get a new person on board, I would think that they're not really truly beginning to get productive for at least 2-3 days. And I think I'm being very much of an optimist when I say that. Also, when we look at costs, what about make-buy opportunities? Not sure how familiar you are with make-buy opportunities, but sometimes we have an opportunity. We can buy services within the company. In other words, we can go to a software group and ask if they have a couple of software developers or designers or coders that we can use on our team. But also, the rates that we may have to pay internally, including the overhead and everything else, it might be cheaper to go outside and bring in temporary software developers which would be cheaper, but yet they'd still have the same skill level that we need. So we have to look at the make buy opportunities. What's more cost effective for us when we're looking at cost risk? And then when we look at procurement time, if we want to arrange something like that, we want to get a temporary labor agency. What's the processing time? What's the process inside our company for getting a procurement through to put a contract in place? How long would it take before we have that individual on board reporting to the project? How long might it take? And not only how long might it take, what kind of complications could we run into? Maybe there's a force within the company that would prefer us not to do that, and so they make it difficult for us to get that procurement through. A lot of things like this can affect our cost, and in those cases, they may also affect schedule and pose a schedule risk impact as well. So now let's look at schedule. What about customer approval turnaround? Is there cost impact? Oh boy, I don't think I've ever had a project where where we're making reports or design documents or any kind of deliverable document, even a project report, change proposal. Somebody wants a change, and we got to go through getting through a change and a change package, changing what the impact, the cost, and the schedule, and the customer doesn't take a little bit longer than they commit to. Several of my most recent projects, I worked very close, bore sighting in on the customer, looking them right in the eyes when we were sitting down and getting agreement that the customer will turn around our documents through their review cycle within 2 weeks, and we'll have them back within 2 weeks, and therefore we can get through any revisions or anything like that and having them back for a signature within 1 week later. So we can put that time, 3 weeks, into our schedule to know how long it'll take before our deliverable is complete, signed off, approved, accepted. Never works that way. The most recent project I was on, I often waited 4 to 6 weeks just to get the first review through. Sometimes I had to actually go after it and do some expediting on my own to get a document reviewed. So customer approval turnaround time, when you have an outside source involved, an outside organization involved that's outside of your project, take a good, hard, close look at whatever those turnaround times are for whatever process they're going through, whether it's approval, reviews, whatever it is. Assimilation of new team members. I won't go into that in much more detail right now, because I just finished talking about it. But you can see where bringing a new team member on can have an impact to a schedule due to their ability, how quickly they can spool up and become productive. Customer deliverables, sending requirements in. What about their facilities? If they're going to have observers witnessing testing, or they insist on witnessing testing or some demonstration or anything like that, don't we always have to arrange and agree on a date when the customer will be here and how long they can be here? So there's always an impact on getting involved in bringing in outside individuals to either witness or take acceptance or deliver or participate in a project event. Quite often, in some of the more technical projects I've had very extensive design reviews where they run for 2 to 3 days, and the customer has many representatives there, and not only that, some of the subcontractors, vendors to our project, had individuals there, technical individuals there to participate and also to present. Quite often, the date moves around quite a lot before finally everybody can agree that this is an acceptable date, and then the date gets cast in concrete. And usually you don't have that kind of information when you're sitting down doing your project planning. When you look at performance, okay, what about test cycle defects? I spoke to that a couple of weeks ago. What if you have some algorithm, something that you're testing, or you're going through some kind of simulation or anything like that, and it doesn't come out just exactly the way you want it to be. I was involved in a customer information center or service center, and we were developing a whole new CIS system. And we got the customer representatives involved in looking at our graphic displays that they were going to be using for operating the CIS system. There was quite an extensive period of time where they had some very valuable input on how the screens should be laid out and what information should be on the screens, and how quick the response time had to be. And I was well aware that they were a government regulated service, and in the process of that, they had to report each month on how quickly they responded to a customer calling in, and how quickly they would complete providing their service for the customer. And if our system didn't respond fast enough, if they hit enter and the screen didn't change within a quarter of a second or a half a second, that would just add time to their servicing of the customers. And so that there was some very, very serious testing done and evaluations done. So there's a lot of impact that can be regarding performance. Also regarding document and document quality, I happen to know for a fact that many designers, whether they're hardware, software, or whatever, they get very, very jazzed, and they're very excited about doing the design, the creative part, where they create some new functionality or algorithm, or create some new widget. And they spend a lot of time on that, and quite often they spend a lot of their own time on that, and I give them a lot of credit for what they accomplish. But when they've finished with that creative part, and it comes time to document the functionality and how that works, and how you would put that into a user's manual, or into a maintenance manual, or into some other type of manual, training manuals, there isn't the same motivation for them to sit down and do an extensive writing job on that. I have beaten that one several times by bringing in a tech writer. And I'd have the tech writer sit right behind the designer, and the tech writer could see what was going on, and they'd take notes, and they'd have captured most of what needed to be involved in the user's manual, or the maintenance manual, the support manual, whatever it was that was required, or the testing documentation that was required as a deliverable out of the project. So it's a lot of interesting things. But when we're looking at performance, these are just a couple of the subject areas that you can think of, that you can make sure that you think about and talk to some of the subject matter experts on your planning team or on your project team, and they'll give you, I'm sure, many more areas that are potential risk generators, or the sources of a risk impact. So we were looking at cost, looking at schedule, looking at performance. And basically, I want you to develop that kind of mindset today, and or develop it further if you're already developing. And I want you to think this way, and realize that there's no magic formula how you identify risks or how you come up. You really have got to examine the details of your project, and you've got to think it through, and talk with people that have done these kind of projects in the past. You can talk about people that have got similar experiences. They'll give you some good ideas of what to look at as source risks for your evaluating your risk impacts. And once you can identify the risks, once you've identified the risks, whether they're to cost, or performance, or schedule, or whatever, it becomes a lot easier. And I say that with consideration. It becomes easier to evaluate the extent of the impact, as long as we look at the impact on all three axes of the triple point, which is cost, schedule, and performance. And you want to make sure that you really take that into consideration. And next week we're going to go through a simple walkthrough on a risk, and take one all the way through, and then actually do a risk evaluation at the end. And that's what we'll do for next week. Okay? So remember about those related impacts on cost and schedule when you're looking at performance, and when you're looking at cost or schedule, look at the impacts on the other two parameters. Okay? Next week, week 7, We're going to talk about assumptions analysis. Interesting. Interesting. Well, how do we make an analysis, our assumptions analysis, decisions analysis, and we're going to get into some expected monetary analysis there. And that's like looking at ROI, looking at different factors of monetary analysis and what we can expect to see what's happening there. And then talking about estimating relationships, which can help in many, many fields, not just risk here, but it can help you in actually doing the estimation of the various costs of the tasks and in all the planning and what's going on there. So that'll cover it for today. I hope you again have a good week, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.